Have you ever noticed that while waiting at the airport can bring out the worst in people? For example, on one particular day, bad weather had caused delays and cancellations throughout the system, kind of like the delays we had with Southwest. Hundreds of anxious travelers were on standby. One such passenger, a senior business executive, was desperate to get on the plane so that he wouldn't be late for a meeting. He kept going up to the counter trying to get the airline staff to do something to move his name up higher on the list of the standbys so that he could get on the plane and get going. The agent had just put down the microphone, having said to the crowd for the third, perhaps fourth time, "Those of you who are on standby, please sit down and we will call your name when we have a seat for you." The businessman executive, he would have no part of it. He would not take maybe for an answer. He went back up and he kept pestering the agent, explaining how important it was for him to get on that flight. This was a meeting he had to be with. Finally, in exasperation, he said to her, "Do you know who I am?" The agent by this time had had enough. Picking up the microphone, she announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a man here who does not know who he is. Would somebody please claim him, offer him a seat in the waiting area, and tell him when we have a place for him, we will call his name." We certainly understand if Jesus had had enough of his disciples, who once again missed the mark, who simply cannot comprehend or don't want to comprehend what Jesus is saying. For the third time, and this is not the first time they've heard it, this is the third time that Jesus has predicted his passion. In the verses right before our scripture for today, in verse 33 and 34, this is what Jesus says to them. "Listen to me carefully. We are on our way to Jerusalem. When we get there, the Son of Man will be betrayed to the religious leaders and scholars. They will sentence him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Romans, who will mock and spit on him and give him the third degree and then kill him. After 3 days, he will rise alive." This is a conversation immediately prior, before James and John's audacious demand, request, favor, whatever you want to call it. You would think by now at least something was sinking into their brains. What Jesus was trying to tell them finally had taken hold. At the very least, they could stop and ponder what it is that he's saying, paying attention to Jesus and not to themselves. James and John, upon hearing Jesus' words, immediately come to Jesus, not just with a request, and this is why I like the NRSV. It says a demand. So they're saying to Jesus, "Jesus, we're going to ask you something, and we want you to do whatever we ask of you." I really am a little dumbfounded at their complete lack of understanding and the audacity in thinking that Jesus is going to grant them whatever they want, carte blanche. I really find it mind-boggling that they would even begin to think that Jesus would do this. They had been around Jesus from the very beginning, hearing his words, watching him, his interactions. And furthermore, James and John were part of the very first disciples. They were part of the inner circle and often with Peter. Remember, it was James and John and Peter who went up on the mountain. There's James, and John with Peter, who goes in and helps raise Peter's mother-in-law. So they see, they know. You would think of all of them that they would get it. And besides that, these four generally represented what all the disciples are thinking and feeling. They're kind of a glimpse into what's going on. So how is it that they have so badly misunderstood Jesus' teaching? Are they hearing only what they want to hear? Believing only what they want to believe? And yet, here is their demand. Jesus, arrange it so that we will be awarded the highest place of honor in your glory. One of us at your right and the other at the left. Jesus then says to them, "You know what? You have no idea what you're asking." And they didn't. They really didn't. We know the story of Jesus' passion. They had yet to experience it. It's almost comical if it wasn't so disturbing. Instead of being annoyed and done with them, Jesus continues to explain to them what it means to be his disciple, his follower. When people get a little power, how quickly it goes to their heads. But that is not going to happen with you. Whoever wants to be great must become a servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. That is what the Son of Man has done. He has come to serve, not be served. This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus the Christ, God's only begotten Son. Jesus doesn't grant our every wish or sit up honor or special privilege. What Jesus says, I invite you to serve others in my name. So here's the thing. As I looked at this, as I thought about it, James and John say out loud what we are probably thinking and wanting. The reality is, in our human nature, is we want to take care of ourselves, to position ourselves. We want the best seat in the house. We want privileged positions. We want a nice house and comfortable salary. We want our kids to be number one, whether it be in the classroom or on the ball field. We want a lot of things that we never readily admit out loud, but we secretly desire. Henry Benton and Paul Welton, in their writing about this passage, talk about one of Martin Luther King's sermons, and it was entitled The Drum Major Instinct. And this is what King said in his sermon. There is deep down within all of us an instinct. It's a kind of drum major instinct. It's the desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. King knew that this was human nature. He even admits that he felt that himself. But at the end of the sermon, this is how King concludes that sermon. He says that at my funeral, I would like someone to say that I tried to give my life serving others, to feed the hungry, to clothe those who are naked, to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. Say I was a drum major for righteousness, and all the other shallow things will never matter. In our passage for today, Jesus presents a new and perhaps stark contrast to the disciples' concept of what it meant to be a follower, a leader, a disciple of Jesus the Christ. For Jesus, leaders must be servant leaders. For Jesus, as disciples, we must serve others. We are to serve and not be served. Whoever wants to be great must become a servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Jennifer Stasek, in her book, 6 Qualities of Servant Leader, gives us some guidance on what servant leadership means. And really, when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking just about the leadership as your clergy or just the elders in the church or the heads of committee. I'm really talking about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I want to share with you the 6 things that she says is integral into doing that. First of all, she says integrity. Number 1, if we are to be true servant leaders, we cannot cheat, lie, or manipulate our way to the top. We are called to do something much different and entirely countercultural. We are called to be honest, even when it hurts us and even when it's painful. The second thing, you notice what she does. She does humility. In Christian servant leadership, we have to be willing to learn from and listen to those whom we lead, because we know that they have value and worth. The truth is that they might actually have better ideas than we do, and they have definitely a different perspective than we will. In other words, we need to make space to learn and grow from experiences and opinions of others. That's why a church that is filled with a variety of thoughts and ideas, of leanings and understandings, is a church that is rich. The third thing she says is flexibility. And I think especially in the season that we are in now, servant leaders practice flexibility. They are willing to adapt to their situations and their surroundings. They recognize that life can throw them into unexpected situations or challenges. So we might have the best plan in the world, but if something happens, we got to be willing to try something different, something new, something maybe even outside of the box or our comfort zone. Instead of allowing unexpected events to cause us anger or confusion or panic, we recognize that God is present in every circumstance, so we see what is the goodness, the gift that is around us. Fourth, resilience. Servant leaders recognize that struggles are real and that life is difficult, but God is in control. Resilience isn't the absence of fear or challenges or money failures. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, to push through and to press on, based on the truth that God has enabled us to persevere, because God is ultimately our source of strength. 5, a servant leader or disciple must have good stewardship. And what I mean by that, to see people as valuable to God and steward their times and talents well. So we see what each person has to offer, because we offer different things. And if we think our thing is much better than somebody else's, we've got it all wrong, because if you go back to that whole analogy, which part of the body is lifted up? The smallest, weakest part becomes the most important in some ways. So we're all on this same level. And number 6 is empathy. When we are willing to take time out of our day to empathize with those around us and put ourselves in their shoes, we become more like Jesus. Whenever Jesus encountered someone who was hurting or in need of encouragement, he looked at them and had compassion, and then he did something else. He acted. He acted. This passage reminds us of our humanness, but it also reminds us, with the help of God, and as we follow and try to be Christ-like, we too can be servant leaders to this hurting and broken world. It's not about making a name for us, and it's not about, as much as we would like it, that these pews be packed. That isn't a sign of our greatness. The sign of our greatness is what we do out in the world, how we treat one another, how we lift up, our giving and service to Almighty God. It's about making God's name known. It's about loving and respecting and caring for others, using the power that we have, the gifts that we have, to be Christ-like in our living. And it's about kingdom building with our actions.